Hi everyone, Steve Flanders here today to talk to you about Insight Webhooks. First, a little bit about myself. I am in the Cloud Management Business Unit at VMware, serve as a subject matter expert on Insight. If you're interested about Insight content in general, I'd encourage you to take a look at my blog or follow me on Twitter as I cover it extensively. So, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about webhooks generically for Insight to plug into third-party systems. Well, how do you go ahead and do this in Insight? Well, there are two different types of alerts in Insight. There are system notifications that administrators care about to get health information about a Insight instance or cluster. There are also user alerts. So first up, the system notifications. You could always configure an email address to receive these. Now you can also configure a webhook destination starting in Insight 3.3. You go ahead and you put in the URL to the RESTful destination that you want to receive that, and then you'll get the information there in addition to or instead of email. In the case of user alerts, very similar story. We've supported email and VROps integration to receive these user alerts. Now there's also a webhook option. You can go ahead and select that as an additional destination or instead of email or VROps integrations. Very simply put in your URL. You can put in more than one URL and it will go ahead and send that for you automatically. Now, what type of products support webhooks? Really anything that has a RESTful API. So a few examples of where you might want to send this data: Socialcast, Slack, HipChat, some sort of social medium, and in which case you're probably having a team that wants to do troubleshooting and root cause analysis. They want to be aware of issues in the environment as they come up. You may need to notify an on-call, something like PagerDuty, or push bullets to receive SMS text messages or browser notifications. You might want to kick off a VRO workflow in which you, as a result of a log message, you want to issue some sort of action that will go ahead and fix that problem for you or may open up a ticket for you in your incident management system. These are just a few examples. There are plenty of other destinations that you may possibly want to send this information as well. So, Insight Webhook Basics. First, RESTful, as you would expect. They can be encrypted, but they are unauthenticated to a Shim. I'll talk more about Shims here in just a minute. And they're capable of integrating with basically any API via this Shim. Natively, we do have support for Socialcast. So you can go ahead and send a notification directly to Socialcast, and it will accept that payload without any Shim whatsoever. I do have some blog posts on this topic. As I mentioned, webhooks were natively introduced in Insight 3.3. I do have a blog post also on how to create this Shim, an example Shim, and how you handle the integrations. I'm going to show some of that right now. So first, what is a Shim? I'm not talking about like the wood thing that you stick into something. No, that's not the type of Shim that I'm talking about. First, let's take a look at the payload. So if I look at a Insight webhook and I get a system notification, here's an example of the payload for you. It's just JSON. You'll see it has, in this case, an alert name, some text, a timestamp, possibly some fields, basically metadata of what that alert actually contains. In the case of user alerts, there's two different types. There are message queries and aggregation queries. Those formats are slightly different. You can see they have like search period, URLs, additional information like notes. This is a proprietary format for Insight. Most things that support webhooks have their own format that they send their payload in. Insight's no exception to this. But if you look at these payloads, you can see things like alert type, alert name, search period, things like that. Let's go ahead and look at something like Socialcast. Its incoming webhook payload, it expects basically a message and a body. If you look at the Slack and you want to have an attachment, it has a title link, and a text. You'll see every single third-party destination has its own proprietary format. Well, I mean, Insight's not sending in that format, it's sending in its format. And these destinations require it to be in their formats. So how do I bridge that gap? That's what the Shim is going to do for me. The Shim basically sits between Insight and your third-party destination. It will take the proprietary format of Insight and convert it into the proprietary format of your third-party destination, and then your webhook will work exactly as you would expect. So if you don't have a Shim, so let's say I configure webhooks and I send it directly to Slack, I will receive the following error message. And that's because it's not being sent in the proper format. This is expected. Now again, I can send natively to Socialcast, that'll work just fine. But something like Slack or HipChat or these third-party destinations, it doesn't work by default. If you do have a shim, you can actually get your payload in a specific format to that third-party destination. So in the case of Socialcast, I mentioned you don't have to use a shim. Here's an example of what it would look like. You'll see I have the info, the name, all the fields, the message itself, and links to get back to Log Insight. So it looks very similar to what you'd expect from an email notification today. In the case of Slack, where you would need a shim, very similar information as well. They support this notion of attachments, and each attachment can kind of outline the information to you and also link you back into Log Insights. You could also do this with VROps. I'm showing you primarily examples with Log Insight, but VROps also has native export or alert capabilities to webhooks, which means I could then send that webhook also over to something like Slack. Here's an example of HipChat. Another similar thing, just like Socialcast or Slack. You'll see I have the notification, the name, links to get back. They look a little bit different, but they're all doing the exact same thing. They're providing a mechanism, hopefully a tool that you're currently using in your environment, and a way to easily consume that information. Again, I can do the same thing for VROps here. Here's an example in PagerDuty. If I want to notify an on-call, well, I still need that payload information. I want my escalation policy to be kicked in, get the right people involved. Maybe I want to keep all my history here. Maybe I want to go to a ticketing system as a result of this PagerDuty. The integration is possible no matter which way you care about it. So let me talk a little bit more about this shim. There's a shim available on GitHub, freely available for Log Insights. It's written in Python today. You can write it in whatever you want. It comes natively built in with Flask, which is a Python web server. If you have Tomcat or Apache or what have you, you can integrate into that as well. It is available for free, and basically once you pull down this shim, you go ahead and run this Python web server, and we log natively for you right there in the client, so you can see as your messages are coming in. Basically, we have integration into every single one of those icons that I showed earlier in the deck. There's HipChat, PagerDuty, Pushbullet, what have you. Each one of these destinations supports a variety of URLs. Those URLs handle things such as authentication or the number of destinations, the number of messages you want to receive at the destination. So it's very extensible and flexible depending on your need. It doesn't matter if it's basic auth or these tokens, session IDs, things like that. All that's natively built in. Once you run this web server shim, you can go just to the slash. So if it's on localhost, you go to localhost in your web browser, and it's going to pop up this help information for you automatically, so you can see exactly what destinations are supported. We are constantly updating this. In fact, there was an update recently. I'll cover that in just a second. So by default, most of these integrations will send the first 10 messages to the third-party destination. This is the same as an email notification. Email notifications in Log Insight send 10 messages, a maximum of 10 by default. There are more available. You can link back into Log Insight to get that. You could use something like the Query API as well if you want to get more than 10, but we actually provide flexibility in these webhooks for you. If you only want one, you can specify one. If you really want 100, you can specify 100. That type of flexibility is what you'd expect with an enterprise software. That's what we're providing for you. Now, authentication is kind of an interesting topic. We understand that there are different needs for different companies, right? So again, these URLs, you can see the token ID or the alert ID or the service key. All the native authentication mechanisms that these third-party destinations support are also supported by the shim. Slack, you can see there's even more options available. Socialcast, VRO is a really cool one, kicking off workflows. Of course, you don't have to use VRO, you can use some other workflow engine as well. What we basically do is say, hey, I saw this log message, I know it means this problem, and as a result, I need to go execute that command. This is really helpful for automatic remediation if that's what you're interested in. This will work also for VROps in addition to Log Insight. Now, of course, we understand that you're going to want to test this if you're going to be running this. You can just use regular curl commands. As you can see, there's really nothing special here. I highlighted in bold the actual curl commands. I'm passing in the body of the message, which happens to be one of the payloads that I showed you for Log Insights, and then the URL based on the type of endpoint that I want to receive that integration. Now, if you're already running the shim, I know many of you are, please note it was recently updated. I think it was yesterday, like very recent. A whole bunch of new functionality has been added, so be sure to download and check that out. Actually, the VROps REST plugin integration was natively added as of yesterday. HipChat was added, and we even extended things like Slack, Pushbullet, and PagerDuty further. If you're interested in learning more about Log Insight, please take a look at loginsight.vmware.com. It is an online community where you can vote for new features, submit questions and ideas, third-party community content packs. You can even request feedback about the Shim. We are accepting pull requests for the Shim on GitHub, so do feel free to reach out if you have some feedback on that as well. And of course, thank you so much for watching.